T113 Basic Theory. So in this set of videos we're going to be looking at automatons or self-controlled machines. The figure below shows the state transition diagram of an automaton. Which of the following is a bit string for which the automaton stops in an accepting or final state after the entire bit string has been read? Here the double circle marked with Q3 represents the accepting state. So here we can see the transition table that has been described in the question, and here we have a series of bit strings which we're going to apply to the transition table to see which one ends up in the accepting state. So, an automaton is a self-operating machine or a control mechanism designed to follow a sequence of operations or respond to predetermined instructions, which is driven by input values and also affected by the previous states. So these are the two things that can affect an automaton. A finite automaton, or an FA, is a simple idealized machine used to recognize patterns within the input taken from some character set. The job of a finite automaton is to accept or reject an input depending on whether the pattern defined by the FA occurs in the input. A finite automaton has a finite number of states and decides outputs and the next state from the current state and input value. A finite automaton can be represented with the type of state transition diagram that was shown in the question. So we've got our finite automation and we have our transition diagram. So let's see if our input sequence will be accepted or rejected by a finite automation. So let's have a look at what a finite automaton consists of. So first of all, we have our finite set of n states. We also have a start state in which our input should be applied to. We have a set of final or accepting states in which our system should finish in, and a set of transitions t from one state to another. Following the diagram, it should start or begin with the initial state, which looks like this, and it should finish with the accepting state, which looks like this. A finite automation machine changes state with the input value of either 1 or 0. In each state in the diagram, a symbol is assigned. So let's look at all of these inputs and see where we end up and which one finishes in our final or accepting state. So, first of all, let's apply input A. First of all, we have a 1, so we transition from Q1 to Q2. Then we have a 0, in which case we do this transition loop here. And then we have another 1, which takes us back here to Q1. Finally, we have another 1, in which case we'll come back to Q2 and we'll finish in our final state of Q2. This means that this answer doesn't end us in a final or accepting state. Now let's look at B. So here we start off with a 1 again, so we first of all transition from Q1 to Q2. Then we apply another 1, in which case we transition from Q2 back to Q1. Here a 0 is implemented and we transition from Q1 to Q3 along this transition. Finally, another 0 is implemented and we have a transition here from Q3 to Q2. So Q2 is our final state, and again this is not an accepting or final state, so B is also an incorrect answer. So let's analyze our input C. So first of all, we start with a 1 and we transition from Q1 to Q2. Secondly, we input another 1 and we transition from Q2 to Q1. Again, we input another 1 and we transition one more time from Q1 to Q2. Finally, we input a 0 and this keeps us on the state of Q2. In this case, we finish with the answer of Q2. So let's analyze our final option, which is option D, 1101, as our input. So first of all, we transition from Q1 to Q2 with our input of 1. Next, we transition from Q2 to Q1 with our second input of 1. So we're back where we started. Now we input a 0 and we transition from Q1 to Q3. Finally, we input 1, 1 and we have a stay in the same state transition on Q3. This means we have a final position of Q3, which is an accepting or final state. Hence, this is the correct answer. Here we can see a summary of what we've just analysed, and it's that all of the states A, B and C all end in state Q2, except for answer D, which ends up in Q3, which is our final or accepting state. So as we've said, our answer is D. And in this video, what we've done is we've looked at an automaton and analysed using a state diagram how a finite automaton works.